All right, well, let's stay with the issue of water then and take it to Ferrial Adam, who's OUTA's water and environment consultant. Ferrial, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Look, we see the desperation of people on the ground in KZN for water. At the same time, we've just heard from Premier Zikalala, who's talked about the amount of time it's going to take to try and restore water supply to some of these areas. We all know that we need water to live. In a situation like this, what are the increased risks of being without water?
I think that, you know, our hearts and our thoughts and prayers are out there with all the people in KZN. Firstly, we have to say that. But also, there are different aspects that have affected, you know, that can affect people's health. So the first thing is that the infrastructure, because of all the flooding, in many areas, the pipes have broken. You've got sewage pipes that are spewing out, you know, sewage into fresh water. So water becomes undrinkable. But then also, many areas have had their water supplies being cut, electricity is being cut. So there's no access to clean drinking water. There's no access to being able to cook food. And so you're putting a whole range of people at risk in terms of health. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that if this, and we know that this is not going to be a quick fix, it's going to be around, you know, we're going to have to deal with this for quite some time for the next coming weeks. You have the threat of waterborne diseases and outbreaks like, you know, cholera and those kind of things that could happen. And we need to be proactive. We can't wait for these things to happen. And that is why I think, you know, the move to get fresh water to people is so important.
How can that practically be done? Because on the one hand, we have the Department of Social Development that we're told is going to be coordinating efforts in that regard. We have, you know, multiple civil society organizations that are also doing the best that they can. But with areas, at least some of them being as difficult to reach as what we are seeing, what are the alternative interventions for emergency situations like this?
Look, I think that in those instances, there's a few things. One is that government needs to be quick, and they need to create, whether it's over radio, and I know some people don't have electricity, so they might not be able to hear, but they need to get some kind of pamphlet out to say what to do with the water around you, whether you need to boil it, whether you need to collect at least rainwater and use that in the bathroom so that you can flush your toilets, etc. But also, I think that government has the ability to get water tanks out to as close as possible to people and to make sure that people get some of that water. And that is the challenge. We've got to get water tankers out across the country. Some of those things have already been in place, because we've had water, issues around COVID. So I think, when we had the first lockdown and we had those tanks going out to people. So we need to use those same networks to get it out there. I also think that the strength of civil society and the networks that exist on the ground need to come together. They need to actually create these networks, find the areas that are the biggest, concerns, and work together to get water to them. I just heard, there's Gift of the Givers that have been doing these kind of things. They work in war-torn countries, and I think that they can do and play an important role in this regard.
The need for water, again, in communities is absolutely dire. With the infrastructure as broken down as it is, realistically, how long do you think it's going to take, Ferrial, before it is restored? And, of course, there are also big questions about the way in which the restoration of the entire infrastructure network in KZN is undertaken. And, engineers are pointing to infrastructure that is, more disaster-proof, if I can put it that way. So infrastructure that keeps and takes into account what the future of that province, climate-wise, is going to look like.
I think that's very important. I mean, we just look at the green drop and the blue drop reports that were released 2 weeks ago, which basically paints a very bleak picture. And this was before we have this disaster, before we have this climate shock. So we've had it, across the country, our infrastructure. And I think this is a wake-up call for all of us, and it's for government to say, this can happen in KZN, but it can happen in any of our provinces because our infrastructure is in a dire state. And you're right. I mean, it's going to take a long time to fix some of these things. But also, I think it's good to have someone thinking that we need to create infrastructure that can stand the test of more climate shocks, because it's not going to go away. This is not going to be less in the future. It's going to increase. Mm-hmm. And so we need to look at ways to have to be proactive in terms of how we deal with disasters. And I think you're right. We need to look at infrastructure that can actually stand this test.
One of the things that we have not spoken about, Ferrial, and this is largely because of the human impact that these floods have had, but we know that animals have also been very hard hit. I mean, livestock being washed away in some of these waters, and that in and of itself also carries its own risks, especially to the environment.
Indeed it does, and I think that we don't have enough people who are out there being able to look and do the conservation that's needed with regards to animals. I think a lot of people are dealing with the loss of lives, the loss of their houses, etc., and rightfully so. But I do think that the Department of Environmental Affairs should step in and assist in that regard and look at how do we deal with the wildlife that are affected, that are cut off from everybody. There's a lot of reports around the animals and also our plantations and actually biodiversity that's being destroyed at this time, and we're dependent on that. We can't think that we're not dependent on all of those aspects of our lives. So yes, I think that the ecosystem in general in the KZN with this has been affected, and I think that we need conservation groups. There are so many in KZN that can actually come and help. We need a lot more volunteers to come in and assist on this regard.
OUTA's water and environment consultant, Ferrial Adam, will leave it there for tonight.